that some of the vials had up to 4 times more aluminum than stated on the vaccine package inserts.
Criminal.
And it actually increased by over 32,000% from 1970 to 2025. And now 54% of kids have some kind of chronic childhood illness. So we started to see changes in him. So he was doing the gluten-free, casein-free diet. And we started seeing quite a few improvements just from that.
Welcome to Holistic Health Space Podcast. I'm host Scarlett. The following is a conversation with Julie Lapidus. She is an author and the founder of Autism Evolution and Centera Wellness. She has been researching the top innovations in brain health and autism for 16 years. She holds 2 Master of Science degrees and previously served as a director at an integrative behavioral health facility. Her upcoming new book, Autism Generation, is now available for pre-order. I was fortunate enough to be one of the very first few to read her finished manuscript. I was completely captivated by the stories of her brother and herself, the breadth and depth that she goes into, the science behind autism, and the wealth of information and resources she provides in the book. It's an immensely valuable handbook for every parent and prospective parent who wants to have the most up-to-date information on how to protect their children from harms of environmental toxins, how to prevent neurodevelopmental disorders, how to best care for their children, as well as how to help autistic children thrive. I think what captivated me most was, first of all, your brother's story. And when you were talking about how the first time you realized what brought on his autism was probably, well, actually most definitively, the childhood vaccines that he took early on, and you just broke down and cried. And, that just resonated in me like so much because that's exactly how I felt as a mother. The first time I realized, oh my goodness, I may have been complicit in harming my own children by allowing them to get jabs after jabs after jabs. When I was a new mother, I wasn't looking out for anything wrong in the medical system. So I just allowed the doctors to do whatever they wanted. But now I look back, I realized the reason that all 3 of my children were so inconsolable, in the first few days in the hospital was probably because of the burst dose of hepatitis B and vitamin K shots. Luckily for us, they eventually outgrew all the adverse effects of the jabs, and all of their milestones came on, pretty much on time. But as a mother, you just can't help wondering, what could have been without the jabs, and also like what kind of long-term effects those jabs may have on them. But anyway, that the first story already captivated my attention, and then I kept on reading your book. There's just so much science that you talk about, and this solid data that you present in your book. I think it's going to help so many people, see this whole industry in a different light. And okay, I went on a literal tirade on my personal experience, but that's how much Julie's book resonated with me. I believe every ex-vaxxer has a sob story or two that forever fuel their engine to engage in this difficult fight against entrenched interests and the heavy hand of the government. But here's Julie's origin story in her own words.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be here. And thank you for sharing a bit about your experience and all your kind words about my book. I do hope it'll help a lot of people. My mom went through the same thing. Like, it was really hard for her when she realized the truth. And so I think, I'm sorry you went through that. I know my mom feels guilty about it, but like, it is, we only learn when we learn, and we can only do our best with the information we have at the time. I understand that it's really hard to realize that. But hopefully we can change it for future generations. That's the hope, right?
Yeah,
And
that's my goal, by
yeah,
doing all of these extra work. This is not my day job. I still
yeah,
have to have a day job to
yeah.
support this work I'm doing, but hopefully our future generations wouldn't have to suffer at the hands of these greedy enterprises. So,
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's really unfortunate when you learn the truth. It was really hard for me. So I guess in terms of my origin story, I originally wanted to be a biomedical researcher to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease and autism using vaccines.
mhm,
So when I first started to figure this out, it's kind of a long story, I guess, but I first started to figure this out in college. So I had an opportunity to apply for this prestigious scholarship. It's called the Watson Fellowship. It's not very well known, but it's for liberal arts colleges.
mhm,
And so you could apply, and you had to present a project proposal to travel to different countries and study a specific topic that you were interested in. And so for some reason, I don't know why I had this idea, but I was really interested in fairy tales growing up. And maybe it was all for to figure this out, I don't know, but my whole life I like loved fairy tales. I read all kinds of books on like world stories and different fairy tales from around the world. And so I decided to look at fairy tales and environmental health poisoning cases throughout history.
mhm,
And so I was looking for remnants or predecessors, not remnants, but predecessors of autism in history. And so it kind of brought me down this kind of strange path. I ended up looking at lycanthropy in France, and they figured out that some cases of lycanthropy was due to the use of ergot in bread, like in grains. So it was a type of mold.
mhm,
So that was causing like hallucinations in people. Then I ended up looking at the use of silver for changelings in Ireland. And I ended up looking at the Mad Hatter's disease, which
mhm.
people might know about with Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
So there's a Mad Hatter character, right? So Mad Hatter's disease is actually, it was a known disease in the 1800s. So what would happen is the Hatters were using pelts
Mhm,
to make the hats out of, and
mhm,
they were using mercury
mhm,
to help with the finishing process. And so because they were enclosed in these, where I don't know, these kind of places where they were creating the hats, they were in an
uh-huh,
enclosed area.
uh-huh,
They ended up breathing all the fumes from the mercury,
mhm,
and they were getting what was called a Mad Hatter syndrome. And so they would have like Mad Hatter shakes, and they would have like issues with emotions and irritability, issues with eye contact, issues with a lot of really unusual symptoms.
mhm,
And so when I looked at that, I was like, well, that's weird. That's kind of some of those symptoms seem similar to autism, like my brother's symptoms, like
mhm.
especially the eye contact issue. And so I kept looking, and then there turned out there were actually a lot of environmental health cases of mercury usage throughout history. And I have a chapter on this in the book that I kind of do a little bit better job of explaining it. 'Cause I don't tell you right away it's mercury, but yeah. So there were cases of grains being used that they were pink. They had mercury usage. There was a case of a pig that was slaughtered that had eaten a lot of mercury grains. And then there's Minamata's disease in Japan as well, which was due to the wastewater from the I think it was the Chiso Corporation in Japan. And they were dumping all this mercury in the water,
Mhm.
which was an output of that corporation's use it. Their processing for, I don't know I think it was a fertilizer company.
Okay.
And so people were eating the fish from the river and from Minamata Bay, and they were ending up getting very unusual symptoms. And a lot of people, I think some people died, a lot of people got quite sick. And so all these different cases throughout history, then there was even the case of acrodynia. So acrodynia, people were having tooth powder. I think it was like the 1950s-ish. So they were giving kids this tooth powder that had mercury, and they were getting what was known as pink disease. And about,
That's for teething, right? When the
huh?
kids were when the kids were teething, they put that powder on to soothe the pain.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I think so. So
Yeah.
they had this, it was like a popular thing. It was a tooth powder. And so about 1 in 25 kids that were using this product were getting what was known as pink disease or acrodynia.
Hmm.
And so that took a while for the industry to recognize that was the cause. But when they finally removed it, pink disease disappeared actually.
Hmm.
So it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, all these different things. And I was in college, like I was in I was probably like 19 or 20. I was very young, and so I started putting this together and I was like, well, this is very unusual. And then I happened to find an article, but was written by quite a few different, I think it was at 10 different people, and they had written a 100-page report on the similarities between mercury poisoning and autism symptoms. And that was very interesting for me because they put it together, what I was starting to kind of figure out. And then I was like, wow, like, somebody had put this together and they had a lot of very convincing evidence about this. So I went to graduate school and I went to a business school in France after that. And I didn't get the fellowship, not surprisingly, but when I proposed to study this. And I was in graduate school, I was actually in business school, like one of the top business schools in France or in Europe, and it was in Paris, France. And I told him I had to do my master's thesis. And I told him, well, I'm only interested in one thing that I want to write about. I wanted to write about the demersal in vaccines. That's all I was interested in because of what I had started to figure out.
But what year was that?
That was in 2012.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
the reason I asked was because, that the thimerosal was actually how Bobby Kennedy started on this journey,
yes,
right? Because a lot of mothers were telling him, the thimerosal was giving their children autism, and he
yes,
started out, fighting to get that removed.
yes.
And purportedly, they kind of started to phase the thimerosal out of the childhood
Mm.
vaccines from since 2001, right? But by the time you started studying it, it's still not out of the vaccines.
Yeah, so he wrote his book around, I think his book got published in 2014. So I independently figured this out, so this was in 2012, but I didn't have a book at the time, obviously. I was just starting to look at it. And that's true that he wrote a whole book on it, The Mercil, Let the Science Speak. I believe I have it.
Yeah, but that was like years after he started fighting against it. That eventually
That's
he wrote
probably
that book.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I don't think I knew about Kennedy back then. I
Well,
don't
because he was silenced. The
Yeah.
industry didn't want anybody to
Yeah.
hear him. They portrayed him as a lunatic.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because it was a big serious issue
Yeah.
actually.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I told them I only want to write about the Merlin vaccines. And I don't know why they let me write about this, but they said, okay, we'll only let you write about it, we'll let you write about it, but you have to come at it from the perspective of the ethical crises in the pharmaceutical industry,
Hmm.
focused on the usage of the Merlin vaccines.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. I spent a lot of time researching that, and I think I spent about, well, not 2 years full time because I was in graduate school, and then I did another master's degree. But so I think I turned that in 2014. And when I turned it in, like to me, it was a really big thing because,
Hmm.
like, people were not talking about this back then. Like I know Kennedy was just coming out with his book around like that later that year, but when at the time, for me, I was in a very isolated space, but I was just figuring this out on my own. I didn't know anybody else who was supportive of this. Even my thesis advisor didn't know anything about the topic. I was just researching it by myself.
Hmm.
So when I turned it in and I thought it was a big deal, I thought like they would be like, wow, we need to do something about this. This is like a
Yeah.
big issue. And all I got was a grade. And like, that's it. And I was like, what? I was like, fine, I'll turn it into a book. But yeah, so that was the origin of the book. But it took me a long time to finish it. And I didn't want to just talk about causes in the book. I also want to talk about solutions. That
Hmm.
was really important to me. So I kept updating, especially the solutions. So I have a guidebook in there for parents on
Yes.
how to help their children to thrive. And it's like a 7-step blueprint. So I spent a lot of time updating that over the years as I learned more and more innovations and new approaches to help these kids. And so that's really where I kind of kept updating and updating.
Yeah.
Uh, and that took me a while to feel complete with it, which I don't know if it can ever be complete, but yeah.
Well, yeah, there's always more. Tell us more about Time Aerosol, what you found in that, in your investigation and what's
Hmm.
going on with it. It was supposed to, start to get phased out
Yes.
starting from 2001, right? However, it persisted and persisted after 20 years. It was still in the vaccines. And then
Yes.
last year, the ACIP committee kind of put a ban on thimerosal. Like,
Yes.
did that come to fruition? Like, is there any changes in terms of, what the ingredients that we have right now in our childhood vaccines?
Yeah, so I can tell you a bit about the history because it's actually different than most people realize. So actually in 2001, right, they had banned the thimerosal from childhood vaccines. So it should have been resolved at that point. However, in 2002, they started recommending the flu shot, which at the time the main flu shot available was a multi-dose version containing the thimerosal. And so they started recommending it for at-risk children. By 2004, they started recommending it for all for babies. I think it was from babies 6 months to 23 months. Don't quote me on that. It's in my book, the timeline.
Hmm.
But then, so in 2004, they started adding it to the CDC vaccine schedule, basically for children.
Hmm.
And then over time, between 2002 and 2010, they gradually expanded the recommendations on the vaccine schedule until it was recommended from 6 months to 18 years. So it was then recommended two shots in the first year of life, 6 months and 7 months, and then one shot every year thereafter until 18 if you're following the vaccine schedule.
Yeah.
So it actually, what by my calculations, like I calculated this, I was really shocked to find that a 12-month-old at in 1998, prior to the ban, compared to 2024, would receive double the amount of thimerosal at 12 months at the 12-month visit than in 1998. And the total cumulative potential thimerosal exposure actually went up from 1998 to 2024 from the CDC vaccine schedule, if you're following it, from birth to 18 years, it went up by 82%. What happened was it was still in the meningococcal vaccine until 2017 when it was discontinued. One of them, I think it was MedImmune, and then the TD vaccine until it was discontinued in 2024. So right now, the ACIP committee did ban the MRSA, and hopefully with everything that's happening on national level with the HHS and the ACIP committee right now, they're in a stay. I don't know if you know, but there was a lawsuit
Yeah.
by the AP.
They
Right.
overturned pretty much everything Kennedy did in the
So
last year.
I don't know what's happening with the thimerosal ban. Based on people I've spoken to, they don't think it'll be like
Okay.
the
Yeah, I
pharmaceutical
think
industry will
that
want to re-add it, but
the overturn
yeah,
was mostly for, they kind of overturned the ACIP committee. They overturned the reduction of the childhood vaccine recommendation, right? That was
yeah.
two main things.
Yeah. So right now, one thing we do have to be aware of is that even in 2001, when the MRSA was first banned, right, it takes 2 years for the vaccines to expire. So
Mhm.
right now, they could still theoretically use it for 2 more years. So you do
Yeah.
have to be aware of that if you're getting a flu shot and you want to avoid the multi-dose thimerosal version. You want to ask to see the ingredients
Hmm.
and make sure it doesn't have that.
From what I've uh, observed, right, policies do not translate into practices. It's just
Mm,
like it's oftentimes they're just so hard to enforce. Because
I
I
see.
remember like I thought mercury dental fillings
Mhm.
were a thing of the past, but
Yes.
I recently found out a lot of dental offices are still using them.
What?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I'll have to look for that, but that's what, that's what I found out. But
Mm,
anyway, there's just so many things, and also a
yeah.
lot of states have passed laws to ban geoengineering, but
Hmm.
those laws are hard to enforce too. So
Yeah.
oftentimes, like I said, the policies are not going to be translated into practice. There's always things that the
Thanks.
corporations can work around. In her book, Julie coined a term, neurodisruption, to help explain the etiology of autism.
And it might be hard for people to understand unless they go through all the science I delineate in the
Yeah,
book, but
yeah.
I'll try to my best to explain it briefly. So neurodisruption is meaning that there's a disruption between the neural glial connections that is due um, to man-made or man-made substances. So due to xenobiotics is essentially what I'm saying. And another thing I put in there is that I don't think it's just for people with genetic predisposition, as a lot of people think, because we are seeing such high rates of autism now and neurodevelopmental disorders. I think if you give someone too many, toxin, too many xenobiotics,
Hmm.
it could tip them towards that. This is part of the total load theory
Yes.
that Patricia Leamer published a book with Children's Health Defense last year called Total Load Theory.
Hmm.
And so this is a new concept as well, is that, we can only handle so many toxins in
Yes.
our body
Hmm.
before we start to have some kind of health issue or
Yeah, of
symptoms.
course, your detox pathways can get overwhelmed, and then, a lot of toxins are just going to sit in your system and do damages. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes total sense.
And part of why, so this is like a new model for understanding autism and the autism etiology. And part of why I came to this theory is is that I think I couldn't believe some of the statistics I found. Actually, autism rates have gone up much higher than people think. So it's 1 in 31 kids, right, in the US.
Hmm.
But also, at 30% of kids, I found this study from 2022. I couldn't believe it. They're showing that about 1 in 3 boys and about 1 in 3 point something children now are having a neurodevelopmental disorder within a specific cohort. So what this is within the publicly insured group.
Hmm.
So I was really shocked when I found that because that's very high. And everyone's saying it's 1 in 6 kids have a neurodevelopmental disorder. Now, another thing I discovered is that the CDC, they used to be talking about the number of kids who had a developmental disability or learning disorder, and they were saying it was 1 in 6. But now they're tracking a new type of category, and they call it the number of children who have ever been diagnosed with a mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. And that is now about 1 in 3 point something kids and 1 in 3 point something boys. I think it's like 1 in 3.2 boys, I believe. And so that is also very high, you know.
So
So
is that
something's
an
going on.
overdiagnosis? Because a lot of people claim, the statistics are not correct because there's a change in diagnosis
Mm.
criteria. There's overdiagnosis. The real figure should be much lower. What do you say
Mhm.
to that?
So I don't agree with that. I mean, it's not me. This is based on the research I looked at, and I'm very research oriented. I really like to look at the studies and see what they're showing. There was actually a study in 2009 by UC Davis researchers, and they found that only a small percentage of the change in the increase in autism prevalence was due to changes in the diagnosis or changes in migration patterns, because some people thought more people were migrating to California for their services. And they found it was a very small percentage change was due to those factors.
Hmm.
And they said it could not be that because of that. And they even concluded we need to look at the environmental factors that are causing the autism epidemic. That was their conclusion from that study.
Hmm.
And so that study essentially debunked that whole theory that it's due to diagnosis. And Toby Rogers also talks about this in his work as well. So this is not accurate. Another thing I will say is that a lot of people say, well, it's genetic, but for something to be genetic, um, by definition, a genetic disorder does not increase by more than 1% over 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, I have a quote in the book, I think it's saying that it would increase by about 1% over 100 years, not 714% over 9 years.
Yeah.
That's from a researcher who was summarizing this. So it can't be just genetic. Maybe that could be like a genetic predisposition could be
Mm-hmm.
part of it, or epigenetics, but it could not be just a genetic disorder. By definition, it's going increased way too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Genetic.
actually increased by over 32,000% from
Yeah.
1970 to 2025. And I think that was CDC statistic.
Yeah, genes do not cause epidemics. That's what Bobby Kennedy says. I totally wholeheartedly agree with him. So what do you
Yeah.
think, what percent? I know there's just so many, like our kids these days are just swimming in a toxic soup.
Yes.
We have, um, we have toxins in the food, pesticides, glyphosate,
Yes.
GMO. And we have like they're consuming so much ultra processed food, and
Yeah.
then we have like they're all the like a lot of kids are just so over medicated. They have like they have this mentality. The whole society is having this mentality. We have a pill for every ill. They're just so overly medicated, and also we have fluoride in the water,
Mhm.
pharmaceuticals residues in the water. We have microplastics, we have PFAS, and a lot of people don't admit it, but the chemtrails, they're spraying toxins in the skies as well. So,
Yes.
like with all of these toxins, what do you think? What percentage of autism cases are caused by vaccines and
Mhm.
mostly vaccines?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different factors, right, that can cause autism. It's not just vaccines, and I go over all that in my book. There's quite a few different possible ones. I think there's at least 10 to 15 different
Yeah,
possible ones,
there's just
but
too many.
probably more.
And EMF
But
too. We're just covered in Wi-Fi and
yeah.
EMF. So
And
yeah.
all these things add up. So there's something called synergistic toxicity, right?
Mhm.
Where
Yes,
combinations of toxins can be even more toxic together
exactly.
than individually, exponentially so. So it's quite concerning.
Hmm.
But actually, there have been two published articles now that have looked at this. So one is Steve Kirsch's article, and the other is Toby Rogers, and they came to this conclusion independently, actually. But they both just determined, based on looking at the different studies, that about 80. Steve Kirsch said 80% of kids of autism cases were due to vaccines, based on what his analysis. And
Hmm.
then Toby Rogers came up with a similar analysis of 79.4 to 79
Hmm.
0.9%, I believe. It was around 79%. So very similar numbers. So that is what they believe based on their research and their analysis, that about 80% of the cases are due to vaccines.
Hmm. Yeah. When people say there's no autism epidemic, I
Mhm.
mean, as an educator and parent myself, how do I believe their narrative, their statistics,
Mhm.
when I see with my own eyes how many kids are, not only having neurological problems, but a lot of them are profoundly, profoundly autistic. A lot of
Mhm.
them cannot speak, cannot control their own body movements. They cannot even take care of themselves. Like a lot
Yes,
of them are in diapers for life. So
yes.
that's abnormal. You cannot just neglect that.
This is an indication of very serious issue going on in our country, because if we continue at this rate, the rate of autism is going to keep increasing. And now 54% of kids have some kind of chronic childhood illness.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah,
not just
not just
autism.
autism. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that if you talk to anyone who was around from decades ago, and I've talked to practitioners They said they weren't seeing the cases they're seeing now in terms of the number of autistic children. I did a panel with a doctor who was the medical director of the Autism One conference previously, and he said when he first started being a pediatrician, nobody was, talking about like he never saw a single case of autism in his when he first started as a
Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah.
And now that's his whole practice. If you talk to teachers in education, a lot of them are noticing changes in their classrooms. So I think, just go talk to people who have been around for a while and ask them yourself and see what you think. But the fact that there was 1 in 10,000 kids being diagnosed with autism in 1970, and now it's 1 in 31, this is, I mean, I don't know how you could say it's just a change in diagnosis.
Do you know the statistics in terms of, in within that diagnosed population, what percentage of them are profoundly autistic?
I want to say it's like 27%. Hold on. Oh, yeah, it's 26.7%.
Roughly 3% of
Hmm.
the population is diagnosed with autism spectrum
Yeah,
disorder. And
yes.
in that 3%, you said 27% are profoundly
Yeah,
autistic.
26.7. Yeah,
Okay, so let's say
we could
26.
round it up. Yeah, to
Okay.
27. Yes.
So that would be, what's the statistic? 0.78% of the population. Well, 7 people in 1,000. And you said what was the original, what was the number that
It
before?
used to be 1 in 10,000.
Right, okay, so 1 in 10,000. This is just a presumption that the 1 in 10,000 was supposed to be profoundly autistic. If they did not,
Mm,
if back then they used
yes.
something different to diagnose them. Let's say that was profound autism.
Mm,
But today we have 7 in 1,000 that's
mhm,
profoundly autistic. So that's still a 70-fold increase.
mm.
So that's still profoundly abnormal, right?
Yes. Yeah, and like I said, like it shouldn't increase by like if it was genetic, it would increase by about 1% over 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So I mean, it is a serious issue, and I think we have to turn this around, like for the future of our children, like the next generations, we need to
Exactly.
figure out what's going on and how do we help these children, and
Hmm.
how do we also help prevent this in the future.
Yes,
Um, if it is an environmental cause, that can easily change overnight, with acrodynia.
exactly.
Once they removed that teething powder,
Mm-hmm.
that disease disappeared.
Right, right. Yeah,
So if there is like a real environmental issue here, it can be addressed and it can be, it can change. Now, I think there's a lot of factors involved with autism. I don't think there's just one. There's definitely like major factors.
yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
that's a perfect segue into, you talking about your solution. What are some of the solutions that you recommend parents take with their kids?
So for kids with autism, you mean?
Well, let's first talk about, how you care for autistic children, how you treat them, how you heal them, because and I want you to also share your brother's story because
Mm,
that's such an awesome, amazing story. He
yeah.
was like pretty severely impacted, right, when he was young, and then now he fully recovered. So that's a very inspiring story to tell. Yeah, so I would like you to share, how you take care of an autistic kid, but then after that, also share like how you prevent it, how you prevent
Okay.
your kids from getting injured or getting impacted by all of these environmental toxins.
Yeah, so I guess of my brother's story, so when I was in college, I actually started an organization called On the Spectrum. So we're providing different services for individuals with autism and developmental disabilities in Southern California. And these were just like normal services like that you mostly expect from an autism organization, but they were services like we had a ballroom dance program for kids with developmental disabilities. We had a mentorship program, and then we had community events for families. And I was researching other things we could do for these children and adults that we were servicing and we were serving. And I found this article. and this was like, this was a long time ago. People weren't talking about this at the time. And I happened to find an article that talked about how a specific diet could help children on the spectrum. And it was saying that in some cases, they were even seeing recovery, full recovery of these children. And I was like, well, that's weird. Like, I've never heard that diet could be helpful for these kids. And like it just really surprised me so much that like I called my mom and I told her she needed to try it for my brother who was 16 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom said, absolutely not. He only eats pizza, pasta, and cheese. He's going to starve on this diet. There's no way he will do it. And I was like, so I kept calling. My brother finally agreed to do it, but only if I did the diet too. Even though I was in college, I wasn't living at home anymore. So I had to do it too, but actually it was good for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, so we started to see changes in him. So he was doing the gluten-free, casein-free diet. And we started seeing that um, quite a few improvements just from that. And then from there, he started doing sessions of neurofeedback. He did craniosacral therapy. He did a lot of different interventions from there, but all of those things helped him improve. And over time, he started to see like significant change, and to the point where he was in high school at this time, right? And he was actually put in special education classes.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the changes he was experiencing with his symptoms improving, he actually went to his teachers and he said, I don't think I should be in special education class anymore. You need to take me and put me in regular classes. And so all his teachers got together and they agreed that he didn't qualify for special education anymore. And they put him into
Wow.
a regular class.
Wow.
And that was at the end of high school. So it was drastic enough that even the school recognized it. Yeah, so that's a little bit about his story. I go into a lot more depth in the book, but so since then, my brother inspired me to try to figure out how to help these kids
Mm-hmm.
because it's quite amazing to see these changes in your own sibling, and so I wanted to help other children as well. So
Yeah.
I started a company called Autism Evolution. And so what I do is I help parents to help their children to thrive. And basically what I've found over the years is that a comprehensive holistic approach is what's best for these children,
Mm-hmm.
especially for older children or adults and more complex cases. They tend to need a more comprehensive approach versus just one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's using biomedical and biohacking approaches. And in the book, I have a whole guidebook. I basically provided as much as I could in a book for people because I really wanted to give people all the information that I could that makes sense for a book. But it's pretty comprehensive actually. And so there's a 7-step protocol in there. So the steps are, let's see. So it's the balanced method. So it's brain supportive diet, adding supplements, lifestyle detox, so detoxing the home and body, is addressing sleep, and N is negating regression factors. So that's something that I really tried to warn people about because my brother actually had almost recovered him when he was in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And he regressed after receiving the TD vaccine, and we had to start all over. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a lot harder the second time. So there's actually a lot of factors you want to consider and avoid
Mm-hmm.
because these kids tend to have um, issues with their methylation and sulfation pathways tend to be impaired, so they can't detox
Mm-hmm.
things as well as a neurotypical child. So you do
Right.
want to be more careful with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see, the sixth step is considering trauma and movement. So that includes birth trauma and head trauma. And then E is excelling, which is biohacking and brain balancing. So that's a little bit of the steps. Like I could give a whole class on each little section of the steps.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a comprehensive, holistic approach basically, and diet is really the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So these kids really need a healthy diet for the other things to work.
Mm-hmm.
They won't work as well otherwise. Yeah.
So, would you recommend parents like find a holistic practitioner to work through all of those steps?
Mhm. So a lot of doctors don't know all the steps, but they could look at those steps and start doing them themselves, or they could work with someone with me, like me, or they could work with a MAPS doctor, which is a Medical Academy Pediatric and Special Needs doctor, or
Mm-hmm.
a DAN
Where
doctor,
where
which
do
is,
you find a MAPS doctor?
oh, okay, so you go to medmaps.org.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
They have a
and
list.
then they have a directory on there.
Okay.
Or they could go with a Defeat Autism Now doctor. That used to be a credential that doctors could get training in through a conference, but unfortunately that's been disbanded and MAPS kind of took over basically. So there are still some DAN doctors you can find online,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think they have the directory live anymore.
I see. I see. So what advice would you give to expectant families or prospective parents?
So what they found is that even diet preconception is very important. So for both parents, you want to have a healthy diet prior to conception. And I think there were some tribal societies that used to do it for like, I want to say more about a year or more
Mm-hmm.
prior to conceiving. So I think that's important. You want to minimize toxic exposure in general, especially during pregnancy. Decrease your exposure to EMF, electromagnetic sensitive frequency radiation. You want to be aware of ultrasounds because there is a risk with ultrasounds and autism. They have found some studies have looked at that, and
Mm-hmm.
there is increased risk, especially like 3D and 4D ultrasounds are really not necessary.
Right.
You really want to do only medically necessary ultrasounds if needed.
Mm-hmm.
You can only do the best you can with the knowledge you have. I would definitely recommend not vaccinating the birth mom during pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
There have been studies that have shown increased risk of miscarriage from the flu shot and increased risk of about 20% of the flu shot with autism. Also, if they're being given vaccines during afterbirth, that also can impact their neurodevelopmental risk. So I would avoid those as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there are homeopathic vaccines that you can use as alternatives. It's really a concern. You can take a homeopathic vaccine, and I use this to detox myself because I had a vaccine injury.
Uh-huh.
But there are like a homeopathic version, I believe, of vaccines that are supposed to help with prevention.
So homeopathic vaccine would also be orally taken, right? It's not an injection.
Yes, I believe it's oral, just like homeopathy.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I forgot to ask you to kind of tell your story of your own vaccine injury.
Oh yeah, there's
You
so
would,
much in the book. I
yeah,
know.
because
It's
that's
hard.
very important. That was
Yeah.
HPV, right? A lot
Yeah,
of
so
people have asked me if because their kids are turning like 12, 13, 14, and their pediatricians are trying to push them to give that
yes,
vaccine. And HPV vaccine is the worst before the COVID-19 jabs, right? That was
yes,
the worst of all the vaccines that
yeah.
ever came to existence.
I was vaccinated with more vaccines than was required for my birth cohort. Okay, I got all the vaccines on the CDC schedule, plus vaccines to go travel abroad. Plus, my grandparents in France gave me the BCG shot several times because they were pediatricians because it didn't take the first time. So, and they vaccinated me themselves, my grandfather, because he
Mhm.
was a pediatrician. So, I was given more than the required vaccines for my birth year. And so I don't know why I got the Gardasil shot because I didn't need to get it. I don't think it was required. I don't know, but some reason I got it.
You were in
Um,
college, right?
yeah, it was right after high school. So I guess I got it as part of the vaccines to go to college. And
Uh-huh.
it was very weird because after I got that shot, it was right before college. I started needing a lot more sleep than I ever had before. And I started needing like 13 hours of sleep per night. Before that, like you have to understand, I could survive on less than an hour of sleep. Like I literally didn't sleep for a whole year in high school because I was competing to be valedictorian. And
Wow.
that's how I was able to do the workload to become valedictorian, is I had to not sleep for a year. That was just how it was. So I was sleeping like 10 minutes to an hour per night for a whole year. So it's not that it was good for me, but I could do it. So
Hmm.
the fact that all of a sudden I needed 13 hours of sleep per night was pretty serious. Like
Yeah.
that something shifted dramatically. So I now had chronic fatigue syndrome. I started having episodes of syncope, so like just passing out, like or losing consciousness for no reason.
Scary. Mm-hmm.
And there was one day in college, I remember I was studying for my finals, and I was about to go take a final, my Spanish literature final. I was at dinner with my friends, and I remember, first of all, before getting into the dining hall, I fell down and I hurt my knee pretty bad. I didn't understand what happened, how I just fell down. I don't know if I passed out, but I just somehow found myself on the ground. Went into the dining hall, and it was breakfast for dinner, which I don't really like breakfast for dinner, so I didn't really want the food. So I got food. I went to sit with my friends, and I looked at the food, and I was like, I started feeling nauseous. Like, doesn't sound like what I want to eat. So I got up, and I couldn't even make it. Like, it was less than 10 feet to the dining hall from the area where the chairs were, where the
Mm-hmm.
tables were. And I couldn't see for a while. Like, I had to sit down on the side of the hallway.
You lost
I
sight.
couldn't, yeah, I couldn't see anymore. And that lasted for about, and then finally I got up and I went back to the table. I think I couldn't see for like another 30 minutes after, or maybe when I was in the hallway, I was starting to feel just not feeling good. And I was sitting down and then I started to lose my sight, but I couldn't see
Wow.
for like 30 minutes
Mm.
when I was at the table with my
That's
friends.
horrifying.
Yeah, so that was kind of weird, and like I wasn't feeling good. I was feeling kind of dizzy, and my friends called the dean on call because they were very concerned about me. And I was supposed to go take a final with them, and so the dean drove me back to my dorm room,
Mm-hmm.
and she called the doctor on call to figure out what was going on. And like this whole thing lasted about an hour to 2 hours, and I just was a very studious student, so I was very concerned about the final I was missing. So I finally went and took the final, but it was quite a few years that I had to keep dealing with residual effects from that vaccine. And
Uh-huh.
I even worked with a doctor who specialized in Gardasil vaccine injury, and
Wow.
he had like a 1 year waiting list.
So you waited for a year to see that
Oh
doctor.
no, I told him what was going on, so they expedited to see me, but they did have a 1 year waiting list. Yeah.
I see, I see.
Yeah.
Wow. You, how many shots did you take?
Okay, so I only got two of the three shots.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I only got two of them because my mom was reading stuff at the time and became concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And she was seeing that people were getting side effects from this vaccine. And so she
Yeah.
told me don't get the third shot. Luckily, because other people who were getting these kind of effects after the second shot, some of them were becoming paralyzed or dying after the third shot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like that. There were a lot of cases of paralysis and death from Gardasil, and entire countries like did class action lawsuits against the manufacturer of Gardasil, Merck,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because so many people were being harmed by it. So it was a very serious issue with that vaccine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Is there any other questions that I forgot to ask you? Is
Well, there's so much we could cover.
I know, but
Yes,
is
I
there
know.
anything else that you would like to share, but I haven't asked?
Oh, I see. Um, I think that I also wanted to tell people about the issue with aluminum because that was something I also discovered or that I also calculated. So a lot of people, some people are starting to talk about the aluminum issue, but it is pretty serious, and that's in most adjuvanted vaccines. And so actually the total potential cumulative amount of aluminum that a child could get is has gone up by 13% from prior to the thimerosal ban in 1998 to 2024 and that's from birth to 18 months. So the other one I was talking about birth to 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I calculated. And actually in 2022, it had gone up by 20, I think it was 25%.
Mm-hmm.
But then it went back down a little bit because they changed one of the formulas that had the highest amount of aluminum. But still, I mean, that is quite concerning because if both of these are going up and the children, there's synergistic toxicity between mercury and aluminum,
Mm-hmm.
that is a concern. So they've even had independent testing found that some of the vials had up to 4 times more aluminum than stated on the vaccine package inserts.
Criminal.
That is quite concerning, the aluminum issue as well in vaccines. And that's not something they've made any policies yet to ban or limit the amount of aluminum.
Where to get Julie's book and how to follow Julie's work?
Yeah, so my book is available for pre-order right now. It's being published with Skyhorse and Children's Health Defense Books. So I'm really grateful that I got a publishing deal with them. It's, that's, I've been so blessed by the amazing team I have there, and my editorial team and the publishing team are just amazing. So that book is now available for pre-order anywhere online. I think they just released the audiobook 2 days ago for pre-order as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's available as an ebook, so Kindle and hardcover as well as audiobook.
Okay,
And it will
awesome.
be released on July 21st. That's the publication date.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be in bookstores as well once it comes out. Obviously, it's not out yet. But yeah, you can buy it like Barnes& and Nobles, Amazon, anywhere books are sold for pre-order. So you can just look up the Autism Generation on Amazon. It comes right up, or I have a website, autismgeneration.com,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Or
can go
just scan
from
this
there.
code right
Oh
here.
yeah. If you can scan it from your phone, you're welcome
Yeah,
to
yeah.
try.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And what kind of social media are you using? How can people follow you?
Oh yes, I haven't focused that much on it yet because I've been so focused on writing and editing. But yeah, so I have a couple of social media places you can follow me. My Instagram is Julie_Lapidus, the number one. And then I have a Facebook. My name is just Julie Lapidus on there, or you can look up my company, Autism Evolution, on Facebook.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. And congratulations on this book. This is amazing. It's going to help so many people.